So welcome, everybody. This is now the 5th ESA Player Show, and I'm joined this evening with some wonderful guests. In fact, from all over the world. People have said to me in recent feedback about having too many guests, but I think when you start to venture out across the planet, there'll never be too many. So it gives me great pleasure this evening to introduce our guests, Keith Littler from Table Football Monthly. He's a very popular YouTube channel. He's a very special guest this evening. So welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
We have Steve Dettre, the FISTF President, who is up at 6 a.m. this morning in Sydney time, I think it is, Steve. So welcome to you.
Good morning to everybody. I've got my cuppa. I got my cuppa ready, so I'll see if I'll survive.
Brilliant. And all the way from the outback in Sweden, we have the legend that is Mr. Bob Green, who's, I think, played in more countries than any other Subbuteo player on the planet. So welcome, Bob.
Good evening, Justin. Yeah, I think it's Collins Harry and Chris Thomas that run me very, very close on that. We haven't checked the statistics for a while, but greetings, everybody from Stockholm.
Yeah, so amazing, really. We have so Lichfield, Gloucester. Both of us are fans of Claret and Blue. It's a bit odd, actually, because Keith lives in Gloucester and supports Villa, and I live in Lichfield and I support West Ham. So that's odd. But we then have, Steve, obviously from Sydney, and then Bob from Stockholm. So it's amazing, really, to think that we've got guests from all over the world in one show. So welcome, guys. Just before we start the show, really, I would like to have an introduction from you, from all three of you, really, about your involvement with the game. So I'm going to start off with Keith. So welcome, Keith. I'd just like to understand a little bit about yourself, and when did you first get into Subbuteo, and how old were you, and what gave you the buzz, and why are you doing Table Football Monthly? You on mute? Are you froze? The perils of live stream.
Looks like he's froze.
Okay, we'll move on to the Steve. So I don't know what's happened there with Keith, but he might have to connect. So Steve, obviously you've been around a long time in the game for many, many years, more than most, let's be honest. So how did you first get into Subbuteo, and how old were you, and what made you want to be the FISTF President as well?
Okay, well, there's two easy questions and one really complicated question. I started in 1966. My dad is Hungarian by birth, or was Hungarian by birth, passed away a couple of years ago. And when he was a kid, he used to play a game called button football, or gomfoci, which is still huge in Italy, in Hungary and Romania, and they play a version of it in Brazil. You may have seen some sort of footage of that. Yeah. And he was looking for a game like button football that he could buy for me, bring back from the World Cup. And he stumbled into Hamleys one day when he was there for the World Cup, and he saw Subbuteo and thought, wacko, this is what I'll need to buy. And it was with the old flats figures. So that came home with him, and I immediately got hooked, being a football nut kid already at the age of 9. And we played pretty much on and off for a few years. And then I met up with a guy who was in my school, who just threw one weird football question. We connected over Subbuteo, and we played for many years. And then I eventually met Greenie and his crazy gang in North Sydney, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that's how I started playing it. And there was always the fascination about it, the fantasy of it, which I think a lot of people had. We played as, Greenie played as Leeds, and I played as Bayern Munich, and there was all that sort of fantasy part of it. And then as we got older, we started playing as ourselves, if you like. How I became FISTF President, it was kind of like one of those, anybody's interested, please take one step forward. And everybody else took a step back, and I was just left there. So I was kind of like, wait a second, how did that happen? And I won't go into the dramas and the politics of it, but it's been an interesting 4 years, and I'm hoping that I can contribute something to the development of the Federation.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much for the insight, Steve. Fascinating, really, with so many years within the game. They've got so many great questions to ask you this evening as well. So I'm going to move on now to Bob. So, how did you first get into Subbuteo, and how old were you, and what's sort of given you the buzz of travelling to all those countries? I mean, I will say that Bob has travelled to played Subbuteo in more countries than any person, I think, on the planet. I think that might be an official statement, actually. That's true. But anyway, I know there's some other runners close to you, Bob, so answer the question. It's fine.
Yeah, I grew up in Sydney, and I guess I was like every other Aussie kid. I followed rugby league in the winter and cricket in the summer, because that's what boys did in Sydney. And then the Australian national team, or the Socceroos as we call them, qualified for the 1974 World Cup finals in West Germany. And I was interested because all these other countries were there, like Brazil and Argentina and Italy and countries like this that I'd never really thought about at age 13 as I was at the time. And I wanted to know about this soccer, as our media called it. And I thought, right, I've got to ask the English kids at school. They'll know. They'll be able to explain it to me. And of course, it happened that these were the Subbuteo players. So in between answering all my questions about how the World Cup worked and how they told me that I had to follow a team in the English First Division because it was the best league in the world, they said, oh, we play a table football game. We'll teach you that if you want. And I said, yeah, all right. And of course, that was Subbuteo, and they introduced me to it at school. We had, at our school in North Sydney Boys High, we actually had a league of 3 divisions. It was, of course, Gary and Don Hosey organising it. A few of you out there have probably heard those names. And I was basically pulled in because I suddenly expressed an interest in football, and here I am all these years later. I haven't played my entire life. I've had periods off it, but I've always enjoyed it when I have played, and I'm so glad I took it up.
Yeah, amazing. Of course, you both know so many people within the game. You're both well travelled. I mean, I've noticed that you both do quite a bit of travelling in Asia as well, playing in tournaments over there. So that's always fascinating, and it's great that we can finally see stuff like this through the help of the internet. Because I think in the years gone by, we'd never really see it. We'd have to wait 2 weeks for the pictures to arrive in the post or something. But anyway, good. It's good to see that you're still active, and that's fantastic. So next question, I'm going to save these questions for Keith Little, who unfortunately who has a connection issue at the moment. It's quite amazing that, and this is this I think the second time we've done the stream where we have problem with connections from people that live in the UK compared to people that live in another country, which is always odd. In fact, Clinton Garwilla from South Africa has had the best connection I've seen so far, actually. Although, Steve, you're running him close, mate, so that's good. And look how far away you are. It's crazy. But next question. So which other table football games have you enjoyed over the years? Obviously, there's been some other variants of Subbuteo, but has there been any other table football games that you can recall that you enjoyed?
Can I jump in? Like I mentioned, the game that my father used to play as a kid. There was a club in Sydney in the 80s, 90s, and they actually became part of the Australian Table Football Association. So we had a Subbuteo section, and then we had the Hungarian sector ball, as they call it. They call it sector ball because when you want to be able to gain possession, there's like a little measuring device, which is like a sector, which you put in front of your figure. And if the ball's inside that, then you've got possession, and you can shoot. The ball, of course, being like a little shirt button type thing. So I played in some tournaments in Sydney in that, with my father. Dad sort of said, well, I'll play if you play. And I said, well, I'll play if you play. So we went along. He won a couple. I never won a tournament, but I got onto the podium a few times, and that was a lot of fun. It's a crazy sport. If you ever look at it on YouTube, you'll see that when they line up to shoot, they set everything up. The goalkeeper is static, so they'll put the block there, and then the guy's about to shoot, and everybody covers their eyes because when they shoot, the little shirt button goes off like a gunshot. And if you're stupid enough to be watching it, you can get hit in the face with the thing. So, and then they all look at the goal. Is it in the net? Yes, it's a goal. Okay. So it's quite a crazy game. But I used to played a little bit of tip kick, which is the German one with the metal figures where you hit the little button on the top and the leg shoots out. I had that for a while, and I remember I used to play matches against my sister with that one, but that's pretty much. But it always come back to Subbuteo. It always go back to the joy of the real fake game.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously same question for Bob.
Well, I'm a bit boring here. I've never played any other table football game. I have played Subbuteo cricket on the very few occasions. I've never played Subbuteo rugby, and I've never played Subbuteo swimming either.
Subbuteo swimming, yeah. No,
that mythical game, yeah. No, I've only ever played Subbuteo.
Yeah, okay.
In this kind of table thing.
Yeah,
I've heard lots about the other games, about the Hungarian one that Steve's talking about striker. And I think, of course, that funny old goalkeeper I produce, before each match in a tournament. I think that's a striker goalkeeper, but I don't even remember where I got it from.
I think, we've all played bar football because that goes with the territory really as another game.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The interesting one, when I first started playing Subbuteo, I actually wasn't flicking the players because I was playing on my own, a solo player, right? And I was actually holding the figure with my two fingers and actually hitting the ball with the base like that. Because I just couldn't get how to flick really at first. Well, a lot of people say that's still true today, by the way. That's another matter. But it's quite fascinating and you find these other games, these other variants like striker, where you hit the head. And I found that quite enjoyable at the beginning. Probably more so actually than Subbuteo, because I always found Subbuteo to be quite difficult to play. So we're always looking for something where we can replicate the great experience of the great game as easy as possible. And I suppose the figures, the equipment we have today make the life easier. But I think what's changed has been the emergence of console gaming, hasn't it? Really, where that's really pushed it into another direction, where people can play with just a joypad, but it's all AI gaming.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that because, I did some analysis a few years ago about what I call the entry level for Subbuteo, and it's quite a high entry level point if you compare it to to games like football, as the bar football as you referred to, or some of the other games. It's quite a high entry level to actually master the sport, master the game, and that is part of the problem. And as you said, the new equipment has actually helped bring that down a little bit because there's nothing more frustrating than showing a kid how to play the game, and for the first 5 minutes they can't even hit the ball. And we used to find that with the old days with the rattlers, Whereas nowadays with the flatter bases, it's a lot easier, and they can actually shoot, they can score. So it's reduced that entry level down. It's still quite high because of some of the technical aspects of it, but I liken it to something like snooker or billiards. That's not intuitively an easy game to play. Everybody thinks it is until they've put a massive rip through a pit, through the beige, and then they realise that it's not as easy as they think. So.
No, that is true. Snooker is, I mean, I love playing pool, but I have to say snooker is an unbelievably difficult game with all of the different elements to the angles with it. And really and truthfully, you could compare that to many ways. I've always said the most difficult sport on the planet is actually, for me, it's my opinion on this, but is golf. Because there's so many parts of it that can go wrong. And of course, you've got the weather interfering with it as well, whereas you don't have that with, say, snooker or darts. But look, there's always difficulty getting to a high level. But I think it's fascinating where it's grown from, because it used to be really, really tough to play, and now it's a little bit easier to play, which is great. I think that's one of the biggest reasons probably actually, why FIFA on the console has been so successful, and PES, of course, because it's so easy to pick up and play, and it takes literally maybe about 20 games and you're into it almost. But anyway, it's another matter. So welcome back, Keith.
Thank you. Sorry, internet problems, but all seems to be well.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to the original questions for you, Keith. So talking about how did you first get into Subbuteo? How old were you? And why what triggered you to do the Table Football Monthly show on YouTube?
I was 11, and Smithy, I'm one of 7 kids, but Smithy, who works on the show with me, is an only child. So he seemed to have everything, whereas I was struggling because mum was making a small amount of money go a long way. And his mum kindly bought me a set for my 11th birthday. And I was such a despicable lowlife that I didn't want a box set with blue and red in it. So I asked for the pitch, the goals, Coventry and Leeds. So bless her, she bought everything separate, which made it more expensive. And I wanted Coventry and Leeds because Leeds were the team of the time. And this will depend on how old you are. Coventry had been on Match of the Day because they'd produced this donkey kick, free kick with Willie Carr and Ernie Hunt, where he'd flick the ball up like a donkey.
I remember it, yeah.
And so they were the 2 teams that were kicking. Villa were in the 3rd division at the time, so they were just too uncool. As for Table Football Monthly, I'll condense it because it is mildly interesting. And that is, I've got this collection, which is quite large. And I wanted to open a visitor centre in Gloucester Docks. And that progressed a long way with the council. But the further it got, the more the red tape grew. And eventually I got the hump with it. So I remember standing in this very office and saying to Nikki, it'd be cheaper just to put the whole lot on YouTube and then people could just see it. And that's how it started. And my favorite story to this day is that we made it, put it on YouTube. Nobody knew us. And we said, look, if we get 200 views, we'll make another one. Because I honestly thought we wouldn't. The only video I'd put on YouTube before that got 400. So yeah, this has all been a very pleasant surprise. But yeah, it's a visitor centre gone wrong. That's why it's on YouTube.
Well, I have to say it's a wonderful show. So really well done on that. I thoroughly enjoy it. And I know lots of people that really enjoy it as watching it as well. So that's really great. So now this is a question for you, Keith, really, more than anyone because of your show more than anything. But which other table football games have you enjoyed over the years? Because obviously you've presented quite a few of them, haven't you? Probably everything that I can think of, actually.
My favourite by a country mile is a game called 4-2-4, which was created in 66, 67 by Tom Waterman, who was a footballing coach and an ex-player. And it features Subbuteo-type player figures, but on a rectangular base that's flat at one end and slanted on the other. So you can block hit the ball or chip it.
Oh, yeah.
And in 1966, you'll remember when England won the World Cup, they were the wingless wonders. So formations were appearing in all the papers, all the football annuals, because the world had gone mad. They'd gone from 2-3-5 to 4-2-4 and 4-3-3, and people were up in arms. Where are the wingers? You know, why is this game so defensive? We used to have 5 forwards. In 1953, England got battered at Wembley by Hungary. It was a big national disaster. And that was the beginning of trying to understand football properly. The Hungarians played all over the pitch. England played in this rigid 2-3-5. And this guy, Tom Waterman, created this 4-2-4 game. Very tactical, quite exciting. The only thing that makes it less entertaining than Subbuteo is it has a certain rigidity to it because of the formation. Whereas Subbuteo, as you know, might start off in a formation, but it can end up anywhere, which is far more fun.
Yeah, it is. Funny enough, with talking about formations, one of the things that you learn about playing Subbuteo competitively is that 4-4-2 goes straight out of the window. When you play someone like Carlos Flores, in fact, there isn't one formation which actually works against Carlos Flores, actually, but typically every player, by pretty much 80%, have a line of about 7 players. Some of them choose to put their players ahead of the line, the shooting line. Some of them put them on the line, and then they have these 3 defensive players sort of in the midfield. So if you're kind of defending a kickoff, you block the channels with the 2 players and then have the one sort of in the middle. So you've got these 7 players as your back line. It is parking the bus to the extreme. It's crazy, you know. I did think once of playing in a tournament and putting cling film on my goal to stop someone scoring, but don't think that was particularly respectful. So I think there's
I'm just writing that down. That's a good one.
Cling film. But anyway, there's lots of different. It's interesting that game though, because I have seen it. I'm sure it's the triangular type. Yeah, I remember seeing it, but I have never played it actually. So now we're going to move on to a really interesting question again. I'm going to go back to Keith. So which Subbuteo bases? Now, there's been a lot, haven't there? I mean, obviously, you've had flats, you've had OO scale, you've had within that, you've had the heavyweights, the lightweights, the zombies. We've had the Char figures from Belgium. We've had Extreme Works, Astra base figures, Stefan Korda's figures. God, there's been so many, all ranging from all different budgets as well. Some of them are ridiculously expensive, painted. But which bases would you say, Subbuteo base, would you say you've enjoyed using the most, Keith?
I absolutely love the second heavyweights, the ones that Charles Stadden designed in '66, and I still do to this day. I treasure them partly because of their heritage, but also when I first learned to spin, which was a hit and miss affair, I found it so arousing. And arousing's the only word that will do. I remember thinking, this has made me a man. You know, this player just arced and hit the ball, which was entirely accidental. And I can't think of many things. All the things that I could compare to it, you mentioned in the guidelines, I'm not allowed to say out loud. But that's how aroused I was. And about a week ago, Alan Lee was here and had the temerity to bring his Char figures with him and very kindly showed me what you were talking about. 7 at the back, these players gliding everywhere. I mean, thankfully, because of COVID, it didn't evolve into a game because there may have been a score record broken. He was so quick. And I enjoyed those a lot. I mean, I get it. I totally get these new figures. And when I managed to get back online, I heard the end of what Steve was saying about bringing youngsters into the game. You're definitely going to have youngsters stick around longer with those sort of bases. But no, I'll play heavyweights every day of the week if I'm allowed. Love them.
That's great. I must mention Paul Lloyd Santiago as well, because he'll kill me.
Yeah, I mean, we did a feature last month on all the different original style bases. And Topspin are excellent. Santiago, of course, have been around since, you know, the Indies grew at the beginning of the century. That makes us sound old, doesn't it? So beginning of the century.
Yeah.
There's some good ones about, and some of the painting on them now is astonishing. But nothing, I think it was Paul Lloyd who told me that heavyweights are heavyweight because they were made out of a coal-based plastic. By 1982, when North Sea oil was coming into the UK, the energy trials and tribulations of the 70s meant coal became expensive. So lightweights are made out of oil-based plastic, has of all teams since. So those original coal-based plastic heavyweights can't be reproduced, which makes them rather original. That's what I like about them.
I actually never knew that. That's really interesting.
I better go then if I've bored everybody already.
No. So I'm going to Steve Dettre, Mr. FISTF President. So your favourite bases?
Interesting. I probably think that from the day, my favourites were the Subbuteo figures that people call, I think they're listed on Peter Upton's site as scarecrows, but which we used to always call Prince Valiants because of that haircut that they had. You know, I don't know if you remember the Prince Valiant cartoon, but they had that sort of bob haircut, and we called them Prince Valiants. But I liked them because they were one-piece moulded figures into the base. And you had a lot, they seemed to be balanced a lot better than the bar figures, which sometimes could be sort of skew-whiff and I just found that I really liked playing with those ones. And in the later period of our competition, they were the ones that I used until all the different new figures appeared. And when we changed, a lot of us went to the sports figures. I know some people absolutely hate those figures, but they were very well balanced. They had a great advantage that there was no weight in them. It was just the base. It was just a solid piece of polycarbonate or whatever the hell it was. The big disadvantage with them was that the figure itself was polystyrene, and they had a nasty habit of exploding in a shower of plastic across the pitch if they hit the bar or something like that. But I used those at the World Cup in '94, and I still say that there were 2 goals I scored at that World Cup, which I would never have been able to score with any other figure. And since then, I've bounced around. I like the Char Sniper Radicals. I've used those. I've tried the real soccer. I've gone back to snipers, and I'm currently experimenting with a figure made by Mike Scrove from Canada, which is a 3D printed figure, which we've sort of laughingly called Sports Figure Mark II. And they're really nice. They're really nice, soft touch and balanced, and I think that's also going to be a future development, is this 3D printing. I think 3D printing is changing a lot of these table games like Warhammer and all those fantasy sports, those fantasy games, because people can print their own, hey, I like this, so they can print it. And we've got to start looking at how that fits into the game. But so at present, I'm enjoying using the Mike's figures, but I always still have a soft spot for the Char ones, and I've still got all my old Prince Valiant figures, which are painted, of course, as Hungary. So, and I've used those in a few retro events we've had.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because over the years, I mean, I with all the new figures, I think I've tried them all. I was quite renowned for changing my team at half time, and that would actually be bases as well in tournaments. And I've used them all, it's fascinating because they've all got positives. They've all got some really great features. But the one thing that that Keith alluded to earlier, the one thing that I miss is in tournament play is the spinning, because there's hardly any spinning anymore with the new figures, and I really love the spinning. I mean, It's part of the game that I grew up with. I think it's an incredible skill to get right, and I wish we could somehow develop the rules so we could accommodate spinning a little bit more, but that's another question. But Bob, your favourite bases?
Yeah, I'm in my entire playing career, I've only ever used 3 different bases. The bar figures that Steve mentioned from when I started playing in the mid-1970s, I had a white Leeds team and a yellow Leeds team. And I used them in Australia. And in those years, in the early 90s, when I was living in England and playing tournaments and running around Europe with you, Justin, and Jeremy and other people, again, it was just those bar figures. I didn't do the intermediate step like many of the other Australians with the sports figures or even the Tocker figures. And even when I had some years off from 95 onwards, like many of the Australians, when I started up again 2010 in a little exhibition tournament in Stockholm, I was still using my bar figures. And I only played like about 1 tournament a year there. And then when Jeremy Bradley heard that I was actually starting to play again, he said to me, no, you can't just use those bar figures, not in this day and age. And he bought me a team of Bodo figures, and he had it painted up as a Leeds team for me. And thank you very much, Jeremy. And I used them for a while. And then David Bush sold me a team of Astrobase CC2s. They're a bit lighter than the Bodos. And I used them for a couple of years, actually. And it was quite good using these CC2s. But in the end, I just got a little dissatisfied with them. And I went back to my Bodos. And I've just been using the Bodos ever since. I just think they're nice. They suit me, the Bodos. Nothing wrong with the CC2s. There were different aspects, things I would do better with the CC2s than I do with the Bodos. But just for me, I'm a little bit pragmatic. In this day and age, I'm no Carlos Flores. So I think that, if I'm having a bad day and getting, shipping a few goals, it's probably not the fault of my figures. It's my fault. So running out and swapping my figures for some other base, maybe that's not going to make a great deal of difference. But I'm happy with the new figures. I'm happy for what it is. And the curling, I don't miss it actually, but maybe in a different world, if we had figures that did curl, but perhaps I would.
I think that's just how the game's evolved, really. But it's really fascinating to hear all your answers on that particular question. Next question is
the thing with curling. Oh, sorry, Justin. I was going to say the thing with curling, of course, is that you've heard the argument about if you do a straight flick, you're in control of that flick. But if you do a curl, the minute the figure gets up on its edge, you're actually not in control of the figure anymore. Maybe it rolls quite quickly on its edge. Maybe it falls over, and that's what I would struggle with that. Even if there were figures that curl, I would struggle with when I think about that I'm not in control when the figure's up on its edge.
If you remember going back into the 80s when we used to play with the big ball, with the old English Table Soccer Association, players like Kevin Dyson, obviously Bob Varney, always seem to mention him every call, I think. And there's quite, the players from old, even Colin Fletcher's that played with the flat figures. I mean, these guys knew what they were doing when they were spinning. They really did. They were in control of the spin just as much as they were in control of the slide. But it's just a different figure, wasn't it?
Is it fair to say that the flats were easier to control the spins than the OO scale? That's the impression I would get thinking back to my memories of playing people like Kev Dyson and Simon Goodman was another one. The way they could spin, you'd sweep blind, they couldn't get the ball. And this figure, they would just flick it with the head of the figure, at the very end. And as the figure righted itself, you couldn't do that with OOs, not consistently.
No, you couldn't as consistently. But I think you play someone like Phil Holmes, he'd spin around your defence and he'd tip the ball with the head of the flat figure. And it used to annoy the hell out of me, but it was a brilliant piece of skill, really. But it was just different to the OO scale, wasn't it? It was just a kind of a different game. But it was great, actually, to have that competition in those days because it was almost like 2 different extremes of the game in one sense. Moving on to the next question.
Moving on to the next question,
and this is about the pitches, because we've all played on different pitches. Keith, I know you've promoted quite a few pitches. I mean, I've seen we've had the winter pitch with the snow on. We've had the muddy pitch recently. I think, is it Pegasus maybe? There's no product placement rules on this program, by the way. So, but I wonder, what would you say has been your best experience with the pitch? Which pitch do you like playing on the most? And
for me, there's always been two elements to table football, and perhaps still all three of you have obviously played at a high tournament level. For me, I still get a massive amount of pleasure out of the atmospheric nature of recreating football. I was astonished to find there had never been a muddy pitch. So when I designed ours, which was printed in Italy by Enrico Technicalities at Astrobase, it was mainly for me, and I was astonished that there was such a positive reaction to it. It had never found a home in any kind of competition play, that's for sure. The winter one was trying to transfer atmospheric pitches onto Astro, which I won't bore your viewers with now, but technically it's a very difficult process, putting color onto Astro. Really difficult.
Okay.
Because the only color on all the Astros you guys use at tournaments is white, because the original Astro is green. So anything they print on it are the white lines. If you start putting snow or mud or anything onto an Astro, the flock gets crushed by the amount of ink you're printing on it. So part of my recent experimentation with pitches has been to see if I can design color and atmosphere without killing the flock. And the answer to that so far is no. But the winter one wasn't too bad because we started with the original flock being white. So that made it a little bit easier. But I have a FISTF approved pitch from Astrobase that we use here when we're being grown up. That's our grown up pitch. But we like the atmospheric ones when Smithy and I are playing. For the same reason that you might play under floodlights one time, or you may use the big ball and flats just for the entertainment value.
Yeah. There's so many variants of. I mean, the old army blanket was the original pitch, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, I've made one of those, and I suddenly realised that drawing the arc on the end of the penalty area is really difficult. All of my arcs are rubbish.
Yeah, I've never thought about the white line.
Fun.
I've never thought about the white lines on the Astrobase though. I've never, because actually, you think about it, when the ball rolls over those white lines, it's not as true as the flock, is it?
Yeah, and one of the ways to judge a good Astro, I mean, I'm not pushing Enrico particularly, but his FISTF pitch, the flock is a little deeper, which maybe some of you guys wouldn't like because it does slow the pitch down a little bit, but it means the white is raised less. If you go to the original Subbuteo Astro pitch from the 80s, anybody who's got one of those following this broadcast should go and run their finger on it, because as soon as you hit a white line, it's like a little bump in the road. Small, but it's there.
Yeah,
it's the only print.
Astro pitch, yeah. So, Steve.
Just following on what Keith was saying, and that's why these new printing techniques, this sublimated printing, is going to change our game as well, because sublimated printing means that you're printing lines and whatever else you want to put. Like Gary Downs from South Africa has done this, so it's actually printed into the material. And I've also seen the new Subbuteo pitch, which is, it's hard to say whether it's an Astro or a flock or whatever the hell it is, but they've done that technique as well. So there is no, when you rub your finger along it, there's no line, there's no raised line. We quite often used to joke that some of the Extreme Works pictures we got from a few years ago, after a couple of weeks, it looked like it was replicating an Argentine football match with all of the streamers and the confetti all over the pitch, because the lines would just disintegrate, and it just looked, it would look like a match from Boca Juniors. but that sublimated printing is going to change things as well, just like the 3D printing is going to change things up. My favourite pitch, and this is always leaves people a bit puzzled, was a pitch that we produced in Australia in the 90s, which was the wool pitch. I don't know whether Greenie played on it, but long, boring story. But there used to be a snooker cloth made by English company Strachan or Strawn, I don't know how you pronounce it, and it was a very fine, very tight weave. Now they stopped producing it because clubs and pubs hated it because it used to wear out. They liked the big, thick cloth, which would last for 10 years before they'd need to get it recovered. But we got some of this stuff, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was kind of like a combination of an Astro pitch and original cotton pitch. It was just the figures ran true, the ball ran true. It looked great, but we used to use the other side. The snooker cloth has got a nap in it. We would use the other side, and the best praise we ever had was when the Germans came to Australia in '91 for a series of matches, played us in internationals. Axel Schneider proclaimed it the best pitch in the world. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find that old superfine wool anymore. And I've been in contact with the manufacturers, and they say, "Oh no, we stopped making that because it was a pain." But that to me was the ultimate pitch, because it was fast, but it wasn't super fast, and it just had that feel, that tactile feel of a cloth pitch. So
yeah, I know what you mean.
It was great. And we made a big screen, a silk screen, to make the lines on it, and that was like a 5-6 person operation, because we'd have to put the pitch down, then we'd have to do the silk screening, lift it off, wash it, redo it, then set it up again. It was quite a collaborative affair.
Yeah, with Gary Downs, thanked you for his mention. Gary, obviously in South Africa, isn't he? Is he Joburg? I think he is. Yeah, but no, great. Really, I think you're on mute, Steve.
It wasn't a placement plug, but it was. I think that he's sort of moving into an area where there could be a lot of development.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob?
Yeah, I think, Steve, I was back from living in England, like at the end of '93. I was back in Sydney. I think we were still using those pitches then, weren't we? Like in '94 and '95. Yeah, I have good memories of them. I mean, a lot of years since, I didn't have as many games on them as the rest of you guys, so I don't remember so well. But I must admit, in the modern era, I'm a big fan of ExtremeWorks pitches. I think they just suit how I play. I think the players, they slide well, the ball has a good speed to it. And I know that individual pitches can vary, but I just have a problem with slow pitches. I don't know, I just don't play so well on slow pitches, and I just like playing on ExtremeWorks. They also, if I understand correctly, they don't absorb humidity, for example, like the old cotton pitches did. So when you're in some venue with a few hundred players and everything just heats up during the day goes on, back in the old days, the cotton pitches used to like grind to a halt, and they'd be like that in muddy pitch in more ways than one. But ExtremeWorks just keeps it standard, I think. I'm always happy with them. And they're green. I like green pitches. I'm not sure how I'd go on a white pitch with my white leads figures and that are all white, including the bases. I might not be too popular. Maybe I might win games.
I might annoy a few people, yeah. No, I do think there's been so many great pitches. I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago, I used to play in the Birmingham League. This is in the 80s. And I won't mention his name, but there was a guy to go around his house playing the league match, and we were all convinced that he used to spray the cotton pitch with furniture polish before the match. Okay, so I used to turn up and put my figures on the pitch. And of course, I used to like sliding my players, and they wouldn't move hardly. So I'd end up having to spin my way to victory because I couldn't slide anything because the pitch was so damp with his furniture polish. But he never admitted to this day that he did that. But that's another funny thing. But I used to love the cotton pitches back in the day. I used to really enjoy using them. I do like Extreme Works. I love Astrobase as well. The problem I have with Extreme Works in one sense, though, is that it's although it's beautifully designed, and I use Extreme Works figures, bases, sorry. And the only problem I have with it is that you find that it really does push the game towards that sort of straight line game, and it removes away the need for spinning. And you kind of feel with Astrobase, with the new Astrobase pitch, it's trying to go back in time a little bit with slowing the game down a little bit more. So look, I think it's each their own with that, but they're all good pitches. I think that's the point, isn't it? You know, they're all good quality pitches.
They're all good quality for what they are. That's the difference in the modern era compared to years previously. All the equipment we've got now is good quality, and it just comes down to your preference, really, your own personal preference.
Yeah. It does make me laugh with the limited funds that we have. We get people that turn up at tournaments, Keith, and you probably not experienced this, but they turn up at tournaments and they complain that why aren't all the pitches Extreme Works, or why aren't all the pitches Astrobase? You know, it's like we've got a bottomless pit of cash, you know, with funding from FIFA and UEFA. But, you know, we can't, as an association or clubs, can't literally have every pitch the same quality. It would just be too expensive.
One of the things I do enjoy, because I can design stuff here, but I can't make them. The winter pitch was done with Subbuteo World, and Pete up there has done a few different Astros on different materials. And it depends how obsessive you are, because one of the things I enjoy, because I get to test them, is that I think Greeny's right, that all pitches are different. It's really hard to get that consistency in them, because depending on the day, the backing, the thickness of the backing, every pitch can play slightly differently. And Pete went to a slightly thinner PVC backing just recently, and it played massively differently. So although I always thought it was the flock and the material that dictated the quality of the roll, like you, Justin, I like spinning. So I need a bit of flock to create the friction to have the his edge. An Extreme Works pitch would kill me stone dead, because I wouldn't be able to get that edge. The thickness of the PVC is just as important. And I've only become a pitch addict this year, just from getting involved in the process, because I never knew all this stuff before. And it's fascinating. And it would be lovely, like you said, if you had the loot, it would be lovely to have an R&D department.
Yeah.
Up there, as Steve was suggesting, up there with modern technology lies the ultimate pitch. It's out there within our grasp that satisfies everyone. Lovely to have the loot to muck around and build it.
I noticed that no one has mentioned the old Subbuteo nylon pitch.
Oh, God.
There's a reason for that, surely.
Oh, God.
It doesn't pass the cocktail test.
Yeah, there's a reason. Absolutely.
Greenie and I, we had an Australian national teams championships in the 90s, I think it was, Greenie, and we went to Melbourne to play in this teams event against the Melbourne lads and some others.
89 it was.
89.
Yeah, it rained all weekend. Was it? Yeah.
Oh, it rained all weekend, and they had this. They had a nylon pitch, and one of the guys had brushed the pitch, the nylon pitch. I don't know what he brushed it with, like a metal, barbecue grill cleaner. And this thing was just fluffy. It was like playing on a roll of cotton buds. And we walked into the hall. I'll never forget. Gary just looked at it. Gary Hosey just looked at this pitch and said, "There's going to be some upsets on that pitch." And because I drew that bloody pitch to play one of the games, and I just could not move. Figures I'd flick them as hard as I can, and they'd move about a centimetre. And I lost the only match we lost the whole weekend. the only game in a match, and I lost 1-0, and it was just atrocious. So I still have nightmares about nylon pitches.
Yeah, I don't blame you on that one. Now, next question is coming from one of the registered users, Jonathan Watkins. What's your view with online gaming such as FIFA compared to playing Subbuteo, and how do you think the two can be aligned in some shape or form? So I'll give that question first we'll go to Bob first. Greenie.
Yeah, I had a very, very quick chat with Justin yesterday when we did our test on this. I've never played any of these console games. Never, ever, ever. I think back in the days, I used to play Space Invaders and things like that, and pinballs before. But the modern stuff, I've never even played it. But one point that Justin made yesterday, I think it's a very valid one, is that perhaps there's a possibility that people that sit and use a console, maybe they're more likely to be interested in our game than your average person out there because they're already playing a game on a table. The difference for them is they have a screen in front of them instead of an actual pitch like we do. But I think they're good because they just raise the profile of indoor games like we have. So yeah, I wish them all well, and I hope they see the light and come and play our game.
Yeah, good. I've got some further thought on this, but Keith, what are your thoughts on this?
I think they're chalk and cheese. If you look at FIFA on its own and of its time, it's a much better game than Subbuteo ever was of its time. And the reason for that is that when you play FIFA, and I stress I'm not a fan, but my son plays, one of the irritating things about Subbuteo for me is you can't put in a cross. And if you do put in a cross, no one can jump for it. You can't bring your big man up from the back. And the keeper can't come out and collect it. And that irritates me. But on a much more minuscule note that had me roaring with laughter, my son was playing FIFA. I just got home from work and Villa was supposed to be on the telly. So I bypassed my wife without so much as a hello and was heading straight for the telly to catch the kickoff. And he's got FIFA on it. And what he is doing is developing his goal celebration. There is a separate thing in the menu that allows you to design your goal celebration. Yeah. And he was really putting time and effort into it, which for me is relatively tragic, but he was totally absorbed, whereas he's not absorbed in Subbuteo. So FIFA offers every stadium in the world, every team, football likenesses, bicycle kicks, crosses, saves. So it's a great football game. And for me, it's a conversation that has no analogy, except for us old cackers. When we were into all of that, Subbuteo was what was available. Now, I play Subbuteo every day of the week because I love it. And I love everything about it. I love its social and cultural history. I love the design phases it's gone through. I like weirdos like you three, with the greatest respect, who travel the world playing tournaments with all of your stories. I love that. I love the fact that me and Smithy are still playing on a Saturday after 50 years. I don't think FIFA can do any of that. That's where Subbuteo wins. But I can't see a world where they would ever merge. They're just way too different. The satisfaction is different. And my son is very mentally able to sit at a console and play with somebody in Canada and not think anything of it. If I do it, I spend my whole time messing up on all my moves thinking, he's in Canada. I'm here. He's in Canada. This is amazing. He's in Canada. And, I'm still finding the whole thing overwhelming. And my son just thinks, Dad, you're a loser. Shut up. Just play. But he's in Canada. That for me is a mentality different to being on the same table with somebody. So I don't see them as being the same or ever merging.
Okay, Steve. Thank you, Keith. You want me?
I think I'd have to. No, I'll admit it. I think I'd have to agree with Keith. Although, as I often say to my son, you think you're playing somebody in Canada, but he's actually probably in Luton, pretending that he's in Canada. And that's the other thing and I think you nailed it there. It's, for me, the thing about Subbuteo is that it's a real physical. When you're playing somebody, you're playing against that guy, whether he's got bad breath or BO or whatever, and it's a real world experience, right? And the emotions and the pain can be just very real. Whereas quite often I watch, and my sons have played FIFA, and they've sort of tried to drag me in, and I just get really frustrated by the what I see in it as a lot of pre-programmed stuff. So the computer's taking over in a lot of the areas. Now, you talk about the great crossing and all that sort of stuff, but it's all part of algorithms which are written that once you've crossed it, then all of the bots are going to respond to it. Now, okay, that may not happen in Subbuteo because, after all, they're just dumb pieces of plastic. No offense to the Subbuteo figures, but it's up to you to make things happen. And I've seen goals scored. I mean, there's the dynamism of Subbuteo can be every bit as real as some of the FIFA. I've seen a goal scored by Carlos Flores, which was from an attack from the other player, which hit his keeper, bounced upfield, and he was on it like a flash, touch, bang, scored. Now, the mental gymnastics that he was going through to be aware of that is every bit as good as the FIFA players. And quite often my sons, they're playing and they're getting hammered, so they just hit reset. Well, I'm sorry, as I said to Louis, who does play in some of our tournaments, said when you're losing 3-0 in Subbuteo, you just can't hit reset and go back to beginning. You've got to go through to the end, to the bitter end. So and it teaches a lot of things about sportsmanship, about real world stuff, about committing. You say you're going to be there on the day, turn up, all that sort of stuff. So that's what I like about Subbuteo in its even in the social thing as well as the competitive thing. So I don't think we could ever see a convergence, because it's two completely different sets of fans. Yes, it's good that there's involvement in table football or in football per se, but different communities.
Justin, could I ask a quick question? As you three have travelled the world playing tournaments, have any of the three of you been in front of a mirror practicing your goal celebrations?
No.
Well, it's funny you should ask that. There's one advantage.
I was so hoping the answer would be yes.
is that when you score in FIFA, I'm guessing, having never played, like you said, you can pre-program your celebration. But when I score in Subbuteo, if I choose, I can just scream out the witticism of my choice, and no algorithm can cover that. It's just what comes out. And I think we've had so many great examples of that over the years as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best one was when Greeny won the Australian Grand Prix, with a goal in sudden death, and it was just wasn't really a scream. It was more like an animal grunt and a victory salute. So, but yeah, no, I don't think I've ever practiced. I mean, me practicing goal celebrations would be rather boastful, I think, because I don't score that many.
Well, I can tell you, going back to the 80s, Keith, instead of practicing in front of a mirror, the guys that I used to travel around Europe with, we would make up words to shout when we scored, because it would make us laugh. So we'd be playing and one of your mates would score in a table probably 30 yards away, and it would just make you howl, you know. And in fact, I'm known for doing quite good impressions of people and stuff, so which I won't do now, but I've had players in bits before kickoffs as well, so they can't actually physically kick off because they're laughing so much. So we do have that's one great thing about playing our game, though, because the thing is with FIFA, and I play both. I play FIFA online. I haven't worked on any special celebrations, but I'm aware of the buttons that you need to press to celebrate, and some of the physical pictures you see on your screen are like this, or like this, or like this. So quite intimidating sort of celebrations that you get from your opponent, who could be in Canada or South America somewhere. But I find that FIFA, that AI, the pre-programmed element to it, is the very reason why I will never have the same enjoyment I have from Subbuteo. There is nothing better than scoring a shot on the run into the top corner at Subbuteo, right? Compared to playing FIFA, because all the goals, I've scored some magnificent goals on FIFA, by the way. I think I'm in Division 3 at the moment on FIFA, right, which is reasonably good for my age. And I've scored some spectacular goals, but I have to say nothing compares to Subbuteo and screaming. But funny enough, as I've got older, I've stopped screaming when I score, because when I was a kid, I used to scream and everybody used to hate me and thought I was an idiot. But as I've got older, because of nervous disposition, it affects my game. So I no longer scream. I just say good goal or whatever it might be, because I can keep my composure. But it is two different things. And I think going back to the question about whether the game has any synergy with the participants on either side, there is some synergy there. But I think when we launched some tournaments in England recently, over the last few years, we teamed up with futsal, actually. And what we found with futsal, it's a sporting, as you know, the football game is very popular all over the world now. We had lots of people coming in to watch the tournament, but actually nobody joined the association as a result of all the work we did with futsal, really. There were maybe one or two people. And you kind of think that's possibly because it's a physical game. It's a totally different game, and you just won't have that synergy. Where I see the synergy with FIFA is what I was saying to Bob, was we could have a tournament where there could be a FIFA tournament coexisting with a Subbuteo tournament. But again, organising that, the cost of that would be somewhat very expensive. Yeah. So that's probably not practical. So the only thing I can see working for us in the future would be to have tournaments with collectors' fairs and have that as one big event. And for me, that would be the way forward for us. But FIFA, yeah, it's a different game, different crowd, different audience, and it's just not. It's never going to be aligned, really. Next question, then. So this is not sure if, in terms of rules, Keith, what rules do you play to when you play? Old Subbuteo?
Smithy and I have always played the 67, 68 advanced, which were the last rules created under Peter Adolph's reign before the sale of Subbuteo to Waddington's. What's interesting about that, there's two things really. And it came to me when Alan Lee was here last week, because I'm very proud of my dinosaur origins, but I absolutely love the game and seeing how it progresses. So when Alan came, I was desperate. We've had different opinions online, but being face to face is so different. And it was a very entertaining meeting. I've really enjoyed it. And I wanted to get him out back so he could show me how this game worked. And what threw me were watching him play was very impressive. And when Greeny's talking about fast extreme pitches and you're talking to me about a rebound off the keeper and bouncing it, and I know it can be done, and I've seen it done. And like Steve said, the speed of thought required. So I loved it, and I've bought 3 teams off him. So as we speak, now, I'm flicking char players around next door. But the one thing that I can't get my head around is Subbuteo was created sort of based on association football, and the modern game is evolved in its own right away from it. And where I find myself looking at Alan and just saying, but why is that okay? I don't like hovering goalkeepers. It really bugs me. They're like floating Daleks, and I don't like it. And I don't like being able to shoot from anywhere. The thing about the 68 rules being my age is, one, when I'm playing with Smithy, when he's in possession in his own half, I can have a quick sip of my brew. I can talk to him about last night's telly, and I'm not engaged until he crosses the halfway line. I love that because we played for 3 hours on a Saturday. I'd be in hospital if we were playing a modern game. So yeah, I like those old rules, and I like it. If Smithy's listening, he's going to kill me. But you know, when you're young and you walk past the Crown Green Bowls playing,
yeah,
see these old, you know, bending down. So I've just got a battery low warning. You see these old fellas, you know, creaking down onto the ground to roll the ball along. I always thought, I hope that never happens to me. But now I see our Saturday mornings as Subbuteo Crown Green Bowls, because that's what Smithy and I do. We play slowly around the table, 68 rules. Keeper's rooted to the floor. You can only shoot in your own half. You can't block every play of your opponents. But when Alan was doing it and you see somebody good do it, I suddenly started thinking, I fancy that. So yeah, based in 68, but I'm looking at the new ones now.
Is there any rule that you, based on the rules that you've played with in the old rules, any rule you particularly dislike?
No, no, there isn't. I mean, I would like to be able to flick more players at set pieces, because set pieces by definition are something you should be able to flick your players around to create. If you can only flick 2 or 1 on a throw, that's irritating.
Yeah.
In that respect, it falls behind the real game. But no, it's very funny because when New Footy was created in 1929, the one thing that Bill Keeling did, and it's lovely that all these years later it's the same, is 3 flicks. What a stroke of genius. Because I would love it if it was 4. I'd hate it if it were 2. But 4 would mean everybody could do it. So 3 is just genius, and it's never changed. That's perhaps the one thing that brings us all together, whatever code we play.
3 flicks.
Types we've got, we're stuck on 3.
Well, you say that, Keith, but there's quite a few players that play in FISTF that use 4 flicks.
You're kidding? Is this true? Right, that's it.
That's it.
Not legally. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but
yeah. So I'm quite easygoing with rules, as long as you know. I suppose where I'm different with you guys, and it's a pleasure, I have to say. When I say different, I find that a good thing. Is that I like to feel that the game is football, because that key part of me is still only 10. My day job is kids TV. I'm not a grown up. So I want to recreate Villa against Palace. We have bought some polish out occasionally, and we're so new at it. We are rubbish. If you saw us polishing, it would have its own sitcom, because neither of us know how to do it. And you just see 2 hands like this with 2 different players. And then we see you lot doing 1 player quite carefully. If Smithy and I could, we'd have 4 players between our fingers and just go. So yeah, you know, it's still a fun football game for me, and hasn't quite evolved into something more grown up.
Well, it's a question for Steve and Bob, actually, because we obviously play the rules that are set, you know, by the FISTF, and when we play the game today, there's been lots of changes over the years with the rules for a variety of different reasons. Smashing being one of them because of the new figures. What rule do you dislike the most, Steve, as a player?
No comment. I think it's a dangerous area for me to stray into, considering
as a player, not as a FISTF president.
Yeah, but if I say it, then next thing you know, it's going to be splashed everywhere. Let's put it this way: you will never satisfy everybody.
No.
You know, you will have. You know, we introduced some rules, and you had a whole bunch of people who went berserk. And then other people are saying, "Why didn't you do this?" And as Keith's saying, you know, some people are saying maybe you should have unlimited placement flicks at set pieces. Or yes, but and that's one of the good things about the Rules Commission, the Rules Committee, is that they try and maybe they take a little bit too long to come to decisions, but they try to look at how something will affect the balance in other parts of the rules. And I think that's critical in the game, because, you know, people say, oh, what you need to do is you need to do this. Well, yes, but then how is that going to affect the other part of the game? Whether that's something in favour of the defender, but how's that going to affect the balance of the game? There was a whole bunch of rules that they threw up. Probably I won't use the word threw up, but they suggested for before the Congress, and which didn't get up because, well, they wanted them to be accepted as a job lot, which I think was a mistake, because there were a few really good ones in there which should have been accepted. Right. But they worked long and hard, and they said they needed to be accepted as a job lot, because if you picked and choose some, they would have an impact on the game. So my other view is that I was very fortunate as a young journalist to interview Sir Stanley Rouse, who, as some people would know, was the president of FIFA. And he was involved in rewriting the laws of football. And I talked to him about the laws of football. This is before I was heavily involved in Subbuteo, but he said his guiding principle for the laws of the game were that they should be as applicable to an under-7 match on a suburban ground as the World Cup final. Now, there's been a lot of changes since then because of commercial, you know, the amount of money in the game has forced things like our much beloved VAR and other things, you know, number of substitutes. But I think that we need to be careful about just willy-nilly changing things. And some of the suggestions from the Rules Committee, I believe, were focused on about 5% of the games, 5% of matches, right, for players who were doing different things. And I think it's wrong to change the whole game because of what, you know, 5% of players are doing. And I think that, so without answering your question, I think I've answered your question. Because it's, you know, and I think I'll probably get, there'll probably be a comment from Brian Daly somewhere when I say this, but I think one of the things I would like to really emphasise is that we need to start flicking properly. We need to have the players, and everyone says, oh, but the referees should be imposing that. The players are the referees. We don't have this pool of paid professional refs. The players are the referees. Flick properly, you know. And quite often we'll, as Greenie will attest to, we'll have friendly matches in our club, and quite often, you know, people are playing and they'll just suddenly go, sorry, and then they'll just pull it back because they've done a dodgy flick. They've done a scrape, a nudge, a shove or whatever, and they know they've done it, so they just pull it back. And I think that we need to be working harder on that flicking technique. I think we still need to define better what a flick is, because I know there's a lot of discussion about, you know, should the hand be stay motionless for 2 seconds after you've made the flick and everything. And I think that's just ridiculous. But during the action of the flick, what happens? Yeah. So I don't think anything that I would like to go on air saying, which I really hate, but I think that's
some really valid points. And the flicking is a big issue. You know, so there's lots of top players that have an issue with poor flicking. A lot of it's been caused by the bases as well, actually, because they're so easy to flick now. Players have actually got lazy compared to how they used to flick when you used to have to think about it, because the old heavyweights, you used to have to think about how you flick the base.
Yeah,
now,
yeah. And
almost too easy.
And I defy anybody anybody at any level of the game to be standing behind their own goal and flick a figure which is in the other half and flick it back into their half legally. I was just watching some matches online, and I have to say that quite often I just turn it off because the whole arm, he's not just moving his hand, his whole arm and shoulder was moving as he was, dragging this figure back, and you think, my God, maybe that should be a rule. You can't, if you're standing behind your own goal, you can't flick a figure in the other half because it's just impossible to do it properly legally.
Unless you're Carl Young, who's quite tall, the ex-Welsh champion. Yeah. But no, but I think, I agree with you there. That's actually an interesting point. Bob, your views on rules and which do you dislike the most?
I'll preface what I'm going to say just with this fact that I didn't play a FISTF tournament from 1995 until 2013. And when I decided to come back and actually start playing at the top level again, I made a decision that I'd embrace FISTF. I'd embrace the rules as it was, which was much changed and, from where I'd left the game 18 years earlier. I wouldn't play with the big ball like I used to in the years I lived in England, together with small ball. I just didn't have the time for it. So I embraced what we have with FISTF, even if it's not football-like when you compare it with, for example, playing in the 1970s at school, when we played 4-4-2 and these kind of formations. And I like what we have. I think we have a good set of rules at the moment. The one thing I would suggest, based on my experience with competitions in general, not just Subbuteo, is that we don't want to have too much change. I think we've got a good set of rules now. Any changes now should be well thought out. The one rule that's always bugged me, and Keith will like this, I really get cranky when I've defended really, really well and I've blocked my opponent from all his flicks. He can't touch up to the ball that's inside my shooting area. I've blocked all his figures out, and there's a figure back on his own shooting line or something, and the guy's got a clear run to the ball, and he just goes behind the table and just goes wallop with this beautiful sliding modern figure and wallops the ball into the net. That's happened to me like probably 3 or 4 times in my life, and it just makes me cranky. So that's one rule that I do not like. I think you should only be able to score with a figure that's in the opponent half. Just a little trivial rule like that, with all the complexity we have, that's the one that I complain about, that little rule there, that it's allowed to do that.
That's an interesting one for me, because I do like scoring long distance goals, but I think that it does take away the element of it being associated to football a little bit, with that ridiculous opportunity to be able to shoot from so far. So I think there's a good point there, and maybe that's something that could change in the future. I don't know. The one thing that I've always found really annoying, there's a rule change recently, Keith, and I don't need to be Kofi Annan like you, Steve, although I have to be careful because I'm the ESA chairman. But there's one really annoying rule that came in, and it was a result of the new bases, actually, where you were playing in a tournament and a player would go up to the ball, and then with all your defenders on your own defensive line, they would basically smash your defense out of the way by cutting the ball. And it just made the game look so ugly. And it was a horrible trick, but all the trick developed with the new bases. And everybody was getting fed up with seeing their defense being smashed all over the place, actually. And so the rule was brought in that if you now try to cut the ball and hit 2 defenders or more, it's now a free kick to the defender to stop the
opposition half.
In the opposition half, of course, yeah.
I think anything that stops the game being ugly, whatever rules you play, it's a beautiful game. I know it's irrelevant to this conversation, but Smithy and I don't allow goals if the player you've shot with goes into the goal, because it looks ugly, like that goal Liverpool scored against Sunderland years ago when a beach ball was on the pitch.
I remember
you get a player flying one way and the ball, and they're both goal bound. It's just ugly. Now, I don't expect anybody to play that rule, but Smithy and I always have. But yeah, ugliness is... Cranky's a brilliant word, Greenie. I'm with you on that, because cranky is the last thing you want to be in front of a stranger when you're playing, because you want to make them welcome. You want to both enjoy the game. You don't want to be the cranky git. But certain things in Subbuteo make me so cranky that I sulk. You know, I'm the age I'm at now for the rest of the game, because these things are messy and ugly. Players flying through the air like fighter jets.
There's interesting. I've always wondered about the well-being of the Liverpool fan that threw the beach ball onto the pitch. Because I'd imagine if he was in the away end, I'm not sure he got home safely that night, you know, after that goal. But another rule that I found difficult to understand, going back to the change in the game, was the free kick rule, where players now in the modern game often force a lot of free kicks. So if they're really fast players, they force a free kick and they get this free kick, which is one thing. But the rule that really annoys me is when you're about to go through on goal and a player impedes you with a block, you win a free kick, but of course it stops an attacking move and it allows them to put a defensive block in place. And actually I preferred it when it was sort of either advantage, which it could be, but or it could be I think it was no. Is it no? It was no. There was a free kick. It was carry on, wasn't it? Or retake back. It was a back.
That was a back, Justin, but you forfeited your next block as the defender. That's what it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just dive in there? One of the suggestions from the Rules Committee was that if a defender repeatedly did this, so caused a foul, you got the free flick, next flick they fouled again. If you had repeated fouls, then basically there would be no defensive flick. So you would go back a little bit to like that used to be in the rules. There was another thing they were looking at, that the distance wouldn't just be, the 3 centimeters, maybe it'd be 9 centimeters, so that you really clean out a space for the attacker. But some of those things have been looked at, but as I said, it was all bundled up too much. And I think that they're now looking at maybe unbundling some of these things and having a look how, if you implemented just one of them, how it would affect things. So,
interesting. Okay. Yeah. So next question, we're getting near to the end of the show. This is a really important question for me. When I first started playing Subbuteo and when I became English champion in '86, I ended up doing some work for Waddington's, and quite frankly, I was doing a lot of promotion for the game the collector's game that we see today. The stadiums. So Keith, you remember a TV program called Number 73?
Yeah.
So I was on Number 73 when I was 16 years of age, and what was interesting about the show was I had to film with the stadium around, so the pitch. So it was quite difficult because I had to reach over, and I wasn't used to that. But it was just part and parcel of how you promoted the game in those days. So but I've always felt, the synergy from my own personal perspective towards the collectors and the players. I've always seen both as part of the overall game. But what we've seen in recent years, there seems to be, I don't want to use the word divide, but I think the communities are separated slightly. Your show is a great opportunity to bring it more together, I think. But there is a separation, collectors, and there's far more collectors in England and the UK than there are players. And we've always thought, why on earth are we not sort of bringing the two communities together? And what are your thoughts on that? And why do you think that's happened over recent years?
It's funny, because when I first launched the program, what I wanted to do was share the history and the heritage. The program's evolved into something different, like life always does. But one of the things that was, one of the things that was apparent early on was the venomous messages and emails that would pass between people, and how quickly, which social media always escalates. They would just spiral out of control. And so I had to get my head around it quite early on. So the first thing I did, I created a group to support the show where the rules are quite tight on language that's being used, aggression, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But what seems to be at the source of it is you've got three headings. You've got you guys who, from the perspective of hobby players, can appear elitist. And you'll hear words like the professional game. I love what Greeny said when he said the tournament players. I use that phrase now because tournament players, the minute you eliminate elite or professional, you're not going to offend anybody because no one's professional in Subbuteo. And then there's the growing solo players, playing with three sides of the table blocked because of space. They can only play on one side of the table. Some can do it ambidextrously, but some can't get their angles right. It would kill Steve because it's almost a legal flick. He'd be turning it off. Who worry that they're going to get obliterated if they join a club. They might get, looked down upon. And so I don't think the difference needs to be fixed. I think the behavioral patterns need to change, which is why, Justin, if I may, and I'm not sucking up, otherwise I'd have bought you an apple. But what you're doing now is good, because if the fourth box was filled with another tournament player, I think this would have been less valuable. The fact that you've stuck an old cacker on is quite useful. I'm a collector. I like to play the old heavyweight game. I think the two parties need to live apart because they're not the same. So we're not talking about unification. What we are talking about is a behavioral change, which I must admit I've seen on the site. In the last 18 months, the site has been a place of great peace and tranquility. And occasionally, not mentioning any names because of your rules, you'll see those people who do get a bit opinionated. And because they've got a keyboard and life is safe and secure in your little keyboard land, they've got the ability to get a little bit daggery with their opinions.
Yeah.
Haven't done. I've seen more emails start with, I take your point, than I've ever seen before. They then say, but they start with, I take your point. People who play solo, it's grown so unbelievably. I'd never done it. I'd never heard of it till last year. Chris Burford came on the program, who was in a solo league, and kindly explained it. And I gradually got it. And what I also got was I saw why they do it. I saw why. To be in a solo league, playing your own games, you're talking online. All the stuff Steve said about your opponent might have bad breath, or he might have a goal celebration that makes you cranky. You don't get that in solo play. So I can see why that's happening. They're not ever going to live with you guys in the same house. It's not possible because you'll never get each other, but you might be able to understand each other. So those changes won't go away. We're not going to bring in a whole tsunami of young players. I think we have to accept that the game is, we are probably its last major generation because there isn't enough to bring young people in. If they come in on the slide game, which Steve made the point is the best way to bring them in because they can get it, we're not giving them what FIFA gives them, which is the stadia, the photographers, the goal celebration and everything else. There isn't an obvious compromise. So I think that the answer for me would be for both sides to coexist and to support each other. And I've had messages from Steve, a couple of them have been a little bit edgy at times, and from Alan Lee. And what I love about them both is I have answered occasionally equally sharply, and the conversation has always, I hope Steve agrees, he might be sitting there thinking the opposite, but the conversations have always been really good fun. And they've made me think. My interest in the modern game has come out of people like Steve and Alan taking the time to explain it. So, yeah, I think harmony is the answer. We're not going to bring people together because they just don't. You're not going to make somebody who loves strawberry ice cream love raspberry, but they can exist in the same fridge. And I think that's, hang on, I want a moment to absorb that analogy. So, I think what we've got to do is unify our thinking, embrace everybody, allow it all to happen. Collectors, solo players, you guys can easily come towards us lot without engaging. You can get the fact that we're flicking players around, and we can look at you guys traveling around, getting these competitive games and scoring points and being in tables and ratings and the joy of winning tournaments. I get that. I'm not sure I would travel to Belgium or to Germany to play, but I would travel to Sheffield, or I would travel to London or down to the South Coast to see the guys. So yeah, I think understanding each other's differences doesn't necessarily also include the word unity. Sorry if that was drawn out. I shall shut up now.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, I'll move on to Steve now for your thoughts on this, please.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to digest the strawberry and raspberry ice cream analogy, but which is so unfair to say to me at 7 o'clock in the morning. And coming back to your original point, Justin, why has there been a separation? I think it's a combination of things which revolves around a lot of guys stopped playing, but they didn't want to lose the connection to their hobby. So they saw it as a hobby. And quite often, some of their great mates used to play with gone off in different directions, so they're left alone with their little plastic men. So I think that's part of it. Why they don't come back? Some of them come back, and we've had some success of people coming back after 10, 15 years, playing again, bringing their sons or their daughters with them playing and getting involved in it. And, like Greenie knows, one of the young guys in our club, Jonty, he was brought along by his dad. And Jonty he's won Junior Australian Grand Prix events, and he's a lovely guy. He's grown up a bit now, but he still has that passion for the game. A little bit of the old school, like a little bit of fantasy, but also playing the modern game. So he enjoys that. So I don't think it's completely dead. I agree 100% with what Keith's saying, that the glory days of millions of kids playing the game, they're gone. But we're not alone in that. And I'm not just talking about other board games like, Stiga or the Gomfotsi or the Chapas of Spain, whatever. I'm talking about Olympic sports. I defy you to go and check how many people are actually participating in modern pentathlon in the UK, and yet they're competing at the Olympics. And I think we had an Australian Championships of modern pentathlon before qualifying for Tokyo. I think something like 12 people took part. I mean, I love modern pentathlon, but that's just horrendous.
Yeah.
And yet that sport is still going. And I've talked to my in the world I revolve in, which is sports data. I talk to people from table tennis and badminton, and they find it tough to get people to come and play their sport because they've got all these other distractions, which we've talked about, FIFA and whatever, let alone, football or basketball or whatever. So to try and encourage kids to play table tennis in UK, I would probably say is as difficult to get people to play Subbuteo in the UK, because it's not an easy drawing, And I'm not talking about the game you play in the garage, at Christmas with your pissed uncle. That's ping pong. It's not table football and table tennis. So why they've diverged? Yes. Can they ever be brought back into the one fold? I don't know. We decided to try and encourage the development of Subbuteo tournaments, which we're going to sort of have a look at. Can we bring Subbuteo tournaments under the FISTF umbrella? we're going to have a working group that's going to look at, because as you know, in Italy it's massive. There are people who want to do it in England. We've had events in Australia. There are events in other countries as well. The biggest question is, do they want to take it to another stage? As Keith said, maybe they're just happy having a 3-hour session on a Saturday morning with some mates, but they don't want to go the next step, which is to have tournaments and clubs. We need to look at that, because if it's just the Italians, then that's not really the basis for a whole tournament structure, and Italians can do it themselves in Italy. But if there is a global interest in this, maybe we're keen to look at it. The same thing with collectors. The collectors, they've probably got zero interest in us, but a lot of us are collectors. I mean, I know that my wife's not looking at this, so I can tell you that she's always coming out going, "Oh my God, are you still got all that crap out? Can't you put it away?" So, I'm talking about Subbuteo figures there. Yeah. So it's some people have I mean, I love it. For me, it's harks back to the good old days of when I first met my mates, like Greenie and Elliot and Gary, Don, rest in peace. And that reminds me of that great period. But it's and we're going to have an event in Sydney in May, COVID willing, where we're going to have a collectors fair. We're going to let all these there's a lot of football fan clubs in Australia, in Sydney. We're just going to go to them saying, if you've got old stuff that you want to get rid of, or you've got that annoying team it's got one missing figure, come along, because maybe you can finally find that missing, Sheffield United heavyweight figure because somebody else has got it. So we want to sort of try and then show them what the modern game is like as well. So maybe there could be some connection there. So, I think that there is, as Keith said, there's room for everybody to be involved in a broad church.
Yeah, really interesting points there. I think what I would say before we speak to Bob is that a few years ago I attended an event in Maidenhead. It was an old Subbuteo event. It was the Anglo-Italian Cup, and it was organised by a guy called John Roston, Keith?
Know of John, yeah. Yeah,
so I went to the event. There's lots of old Subbuteo players there. There's a collector's fair, there's a tournament going on as well. It's a wonderful day out. I got to the final, lost on a shootout to an Italian in the final, which was funny for him, not me. But it was a great experience, and I thought, well, surely this has got to work. We can have like a tournament where we can have equipment on display, collectors, selling products. Absolutely, let's get it together in events. Maybe there will always be a slight divide in one sense online in communities and that sort of thing, but surely socially it's got to be a good thing for all of us to be able to meet up, and join forces so we can have a really good event, tournament and collectors fair. I mean, how fantastic would that be if we can do that more often? And Haverhill, I think that you're filming, aren't you, Keith? Haverhill?
Yeah. One of the great things that we're doing now, this is my first time doing this. The first time I came across Steve was a message on Facebook. First time I came across Alan was a message on Facebook. And so many judgments get made by what you see in those few words. And to do this now, we're talking about a vast array of things here. There's no falling out. There's no raised voices. There's no issues coming out of it at all. And that's how it would be if everybody did it, because we've got our psychos like everybody, but there's not that many. So for me, I think the thing about putting a collector's fair a tournament, a little tournament, having a little kids table. In my studio next door, right now, there are 6 tables. 2 are set up for playing the modern game. The other 4 have got snowy pitch, muddy pitch. There's a training pitch. So when the kids come in here to work, I work in kids telly. So the room I'm in now is the proper telly studio. When the kids come here and I show them outside, the first thing they all do, honestly, they walk out and they just go, because they think I've got the biggest playroom in the world. Yeah. The games they like playing are Casden, Chad Valley, the mechanical games where you turn a knob or flick a lever, because they can do that instantly. If I had foosball, they'd all be doing that. All the other games need a bit of skill, but they love the room. So I think you're right. If I went to a place and saw you 3 guys and we were at the bar, we would have this discussion. Steve would be able to appreciate my raspberry and strawberry analogy face to face, which I know he's desperate to do. And we would have a really nice time. And we'd all come away. I know I would. I love hearing you guys talk about your tournaments and your past friendships. I love hearing the stories about the different people at the table, their different approach to the game. It's not my thing, but I would cover it, which, as you said, I'm going to Haverhill and other places because I want to see this in action. Plus, the very last point, filming modern Subbuteo is very, very difficult. Yeah, and I've been in telly for 33 years. Yeah. I want to go and do that and see how we can make it different.
Fantastic.
Good enough excuse to go out, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be definitely at the bar with you anyway. Bob, and Bob will be at the bar as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it won't be any strawberry or raspberry thing I'd be drinking either. I can promise you. I think about this thing about collectors and people such as Keith and Smithy playing their old rules. And I think there's a lot of just it's about respecting people. We're all at our different levels. We've all got our different interests. And when you said, Keith, about all these sharp conversations, I can't think what there is to be sharp about with anybody. I mean, maybe it was the 18 years out, and when I came back, I just thought, well, I'm either going to enjoy it or I'm just going to stop playing. I'm not going to get involved in any of this stuff. And I think we all just have to respect each other. I choose to play the FISTF rules, as I said before. That's the time that I have. I want to try and play at the elite level, which, of course, is so much stronger now compared to what it was 20 years ago. And I do think that, as you say, it intimidates many of the club players or the collectors as well. And again, as a player, I represent the past now. I don't represent the future. If I get any opportunity, whether it's at a tournament or wherever it is, my job is actually to try and train up any junior or any weaker player, for the want of a better word, who wants anyone who wants to listen to me. Yeah, I will give my time to them, whether it's the juniors in Australia, whether it's even Benji Batten coming to Milan at the end of 2019 and playing in a major, I think, for the first time in his life, just to be with him during the day, because it's the biggest tournament he'd ever been at. It's all about helping the other players through, people that when they want a bit of help, and just help them out, because we are one community, despite our various skill levels or interests such as the collectors have, or the solo players. I'm not a collector. I'm not a solo player. I don't want to be, but I respect them, absolutely. And I'd be more than happy to say share a venue with them. And I'd be really interested when I got knocked out of a tournament to run around all the collectors and see what they've got, and see what old stuff I remember from years and years ago. So people just shouldn't be arguing with each other. Life's too short.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that, Bob. Great words. Right, we're coming right to the end now. I just there's one last question though, because it's always nice to leave or finish the show in sort of humorous spirits. I mean, I've got, as I've shared on a few shows, very many funny stories within the game. I know Bob has more than me in terms of funny things that he's experienced in the game. But for Keith, I mean, you've obviously been around the game. Has there been, with the TV show that you do and everything else, what would you say, and this is the question for all of the 3 of you now, what would you say has been the funniest thing that's happened to you in association with the game of Subbuteo?
Well, do you know what? For me, it's the people, because the game itself isn't funny. You know, there's nothing funny about it. There's little plastic players, there's grandstands, there's photographers, there's a fence. So the people I love. And what I love, and I get it every Saturday, and it makes me laugh every Saturday, is at the moment I've been on a good streak each Saturday. So Smithy has taken a few beatings and the pendulum will swing the other way. So I've got to enjoy it while it lasts. What I love that makes me laugh is when he misses a sitter, when his goalkeeper lets in a goal. I love the fact that it's never him. So when his striker misses, he'll say, "What are you doing?" Look at when his goalkeeper's fumbled, he'll just say, "I can't believe he did that." And I love it. And I want to mention it to him and just say, "I love the way you do that." But I know if I do, he'll stop. So I have to stay quiet about it. So that's been happening now for 40 odd years. I did it myself for the first time Saturday just gone. Yesterday. I did it myself yesterday. I missed a sitter and I just said, "I can't believe he missed that." I thought that would never happen. So yeah, I love that. I love the fact that when Steve said about playing people, everybody's so different. When Alan Lee came, I thought because of the ESA, because of things I've done on associations and federations, I thought there'd be a little jarring. I really did. And a nicer bloke you couldn't meet. He came in here, it was a lovely few hours. And like Greenie said, Alan, without I think knowing it, started teaching me. And he did it in such a way that I found it impossible to take any offense. In fact, I was mesmerized. I was thinking, I want to try how to do that. So yeah, my funniest will always be to everybody watching this, the people in the game are fantastic. Genuinely, there's so many that are fantastic. And we have such a big basic thing in common. You don't have to spend that 5, 6, 8 meetings you normally have to become friends. You can become friends in an hour because of that thing we have in common. And when Alan left, you know, I'm not going to stand here and say I missed him waving my hanky as he drove away. But, you know, it was close. You know, there were a few tears. But we're going to meet up again. He got back to Faversham. I said, "Oh, I'll come down again." What I would love out of all of this is what we've done today. I've really enjoyed listening to you guys. Is that that little thing we have in common is going to open the door to all kinds of fun, you know, real fun. Swap meets, games, going to tournaments, watching you guys play. Before people criticize it, go to one, watch it, see the concentration, the speed of thought. Have a look at the player types. I must quickly tell you this, though, because this is made me laugh. Alan said to me, "I can supply you with these char figures." I thought, right, I've got to do this. And they're not cheap, as you will know. So the next day I thought, right, I'm buying 2. So I ordered 2 teams from him. And I thought, while I'm at it, I'll get a couple of goalkeepers because he had these very nice looking goalkeepers. So over 100 quid went out. Dead prompt, Alan got the boxes to me and I ripped open the packaging. I got the box out and one had England on the front and the other had Scotland. And I pulled the lid off and they were unpainted. I just assumed like the old days of Subbuteo.
Oh, God, yeah.
When I took the lid off, there would be an England team in there. There wasn't. There was just a sticky label on the front. So I've spent all that money and I've got to bloody paint them myself.
Yeah, that is disappointing.
So that's what I'll be doing for the next 2 weeks.
Right. Brilliant. Steve, come on. I know you're FISTF President. I know you have to be impartial, but you must have a belter of a story somewhere.
Well, I do. And unfortunately, mine involves Greenie.
Oh, dear.
When we went to that tournament, and it's got nothing to do with what happened on the pitch. When we went to that tournament in Melbourne, we drove. There were 4 of us. There was me, Greenie, Gary, and it was Elliot, wasn't it?
I think it was Elliot was the 4th one, yeah.
And we drove. It's a 12-hour. Back then, it was a 12-hour drive from Sydney to Melbourne on the dodgy roads. Now it's about a 7.5-hour trip, so that shows you how things have improved. But we shared the driving, and everyone was telling stories. And of course, Greenie told an unrepeatable story about a relationship with a girl, and I was driving at the time, and when the punchline came, I almost lost control of the car and veered across 3 lanes of traffic. And it was a great trip. All up, it was just basically a crazy weekend. We went to Melbourne, and as Greenie said, it didn't stop raining the whole time. But it was just so much fun being with those other 3 crazy guys, meeting up with the guys in Melbourne. And the biggest surprise the whole weekend, we had a teams event, but we also had a couple of individual tournaments as a sort of warm-up. And as we were all getting ready to start, in walked one of the Socceroos, one of the members of the Australian national football team, a guy called Warren Spink, who turned up, and we kind of all just did a double take, and he said, "Can I register?" And we went, "Yeah, do you know how to play?" And he'd actually run a tournament amongst all the players who are at the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra when he was there. And he ran the whole tournament, had roped everybody in, and they used to play every week. So he took part in this tournament, and that to me was one of the great, most amusing things I've ever seen. Yeah, of course, everybody wanted to make sure they played him so they could say, "I played one of the Socceroos. I beat a Socceroo," type thing. And I still stay in touch with him. And he's a great guy. He's coaching up in now in Newcastle in Australia. But yeah, the Greenie story that made me almost have a head-on crash. Maybe that's not the best thing, but God almighty.
I can imagine, honestly, with Rob. So, Bob, are you going to share one?
Yeah, I think there's so many incidents. A lot of them from my time living in England were immortalised in those trip reports I used to write about those journeys. And there are so many people to talk about. I mean, the trip that Steve just mentioned to Melbourne in 1989, that was for me, that was just a precursor of things to come with the English trips, where you'd drive from England into France or Germany or somewhere, and Jeremy Bradley would turn up with a plastic bag full of chocolate, and most of it would end up smeared on the inside of the car rather than in his mouth. This was just something that repeated itself every trip. There was the time we spent all day driving to Germany. I think it was Jeremy, myself, I think Steve Hawkins, and perhaps Simon Goodman. And we had this game we used to play called Trivial Pursuit Tennis. And it was with the Trivial Pursuit questions, and we'd manipulated it so you could play sets of tennis between all of us in the car. And we spent all day driving to Martin Schrott's house in Germany. I think it was Martin. And we were in the middle of a tiebreaker. And despite the fact that we'd driven all day, we were still sitting in the car for another half an hour outside Martin's house, finishing off this tiebreaker. I can't remember. I think one of my favourites actually though was, for you guys all realise the attitude back in the days with British people about Subbuteo. The people that didn't play but had heard of it all thought it was like a kid's game. So the fact that I, as an adult, played this game, and the same for you guys, was always a bit of, some mirth, like, "Oh, it's a kid's game, but you're playing, are you? Okay." Well, when they had that little promotional tournament in Stockholm in 2010 that I agreed to go along to just to help out, I had no agenda by going. Just by luck, there was an English guy that I worked with who was in this sports bar where they had the tournament at, a guy called Chris. And it was a summer's day. Chris had been playing golf with his mates. And I got his attention, and then Chris came over and he said, "Oh, Bob," he said, "I didn't realize that you're a Subbuteo player." I said, "Oh, I haven't played for years. I'm just here really to help out." But I said, "Back in Australia, I used to play all the time." And then he thought he was being really clever, and he said, "I suppose you're going to tell me that you're Australian champion." And I just said the following 4 words: "Actually, Chris, I was." you know, and that was it. His jaw just hit the ground, you know. He thought he was being such a smart guy, you know.
Fantastic.
So yeah, but it is like others. It's the people. That's what it is. It's all about the people that you know through this, and the fun you have usually outside of the venue.
One of the things that, I mean, there's been so many funny stories, but obviously when you play abroad, Keith, there are some really funny stories. And I played for a number of teams abroad. One team I played for was in Valletta Lions. And my dad will tell you this, but I'm renowned for a lot of players will know this when they've roomed with me. I'm renowned for horrendous snoring. Okay. I'll get it out there. It's something that I need to share, right? It's fine. I've got a problem. I've tried to fix it. I can't, right? Anyway, I went to this tournament. It was in Italy, and the Maltese guys told me on the night. They said just stay out all night, you know, no problem. This was like the second night of me being there, and I said, "Oh yeah, but we've got the tournament the next day." And they said, "Yeah, but you know, just enjoy yourself. Go to the club with the other younger guys." So I did. Anyway, I was absolutely slaughtered. I think I got back maybe about 3 o'clock in the morning. And as I got back to the hotel, the guy I was sharing with, as I got to the 4th floor, it might have been Naples or Rome, but got to 4th floor, walked down the corridor, and my bed was in the corridor. Okay,
yeah,
so
they were trying to tell you something, Justin.
They did. So I actually slept in the corridor. Right, so
you need a CPAP machine, matey.
Anyway, on that note, but listen, I think what a wonderful show. We've had 3 super guests, so I really appreciate you attending this evening. So thank you so much, Keith, for your time. You can take yourselves off mute now because it doesn't matter so much. But you're all on mute. So, no, Keith, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for asking me. Loved it. Thank you.
Hopefully you'll invite me to Table Football Monthly one day. That'll be cool.
You're all welcome. Anytime.
Brilliant. But no, thank you. Your insight has been fascinating. So I think a lot of people watching the show and the recordings of the show, they'll be on YouTube and Facebook, will be fascinated by what you know about the game so far. And Steve, thank you so much, Steve, for joining us so early in the morning. You poor sod.
It's not so early now.
I know. Yeah.
No, but it was great. Really appreciated and great to chat with you and Keith, and of course Greenie is always amusing.
Brilliant. And obviously Bob from Stockholm.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me on, Justin.
Yeah, well,
it's been really good to be here, Yeah, really good to be here. And I'll just flash my Northern Falcons badge if I can find that, just to remind everybody what a great club we have in Sydney. Or as you once said in an email on Facebook, Justin, did that Croatia shirt have a problem in the wash?
and you can even see behind me my Northern Falcons table with the checks on the table.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And Keith, send my regards to Smithy.
Yes.
Will do.
All right.
Nice to meet you three of you.
He's
Thanks
famous now. I've never heard of him before today.
No, but you will see him, sure, if you watch the show. All right. But so thank you, guys. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
See you soon.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Cheers.
Thanks, Justin.
Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.